In today's video, I never thought a simple afternoon of cleaning could unravel 2 decades of silence. But sometimes, life hides stories in the places we least expect. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind of day where the house felt heavier with stillness. I had decided to clean out the attic, a task I had been avoiding for years. Dusty boxes, old photo albums, forgotten clothes, memories I wasn't sure I wanted to confront. As I pushed aside a pile of worn-out books, my eyes caught something unusual. A small envelope, tucked carefully between the pages of a diary I hadn't opened in years. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges, and across the front was my name. My heart skipped a beat, because the handwriting, it wasn't just familiar. It was unforgettable. It belonged to Daniel. Daniel, the man I had once loved with every part of me. The man I thought I would grow old with. The man who had vanished from my life 20 years ago. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. I could almost hear his voice, see his smile, feel the warmth of his presence. Memories I had buried came rushing back all at once. I sat on the attic floor, holding that envelope as if it were a piece of my past come alive. Should I open it? Or leave the mystery untouched? Part of me was terrified. What if it contained answers I wasn't ready for? Or worse, what if it reminded me of a pain I had spent years trying to forget? But I knew one thing for certain. Once you find something like this, you can't ignore it. So with shaking hands I tore the seal. And as I unfolded the fragile paper, I had no idea that what I was about to read would turn my world upside down. When I saw Daniel's handwriting on that envelope, memories came rushing back like a storm breaking through closed windows. I met him when I was 27. At the time, life felt heavy, predictable, and ordinary. I worked long hours, surrounded by people but still feeling alone. Then Daniel walked in. He wasn't the kind of man you could overlook. His presence filled the room without him even trying. He had a smile that made strangers feel like old friends, and eyes that carried both warmth and mystery. I remember the first time we spoke. It was at a bookstore. I was browsing through the shelves, lost in the words of authors I admired, when he picked up the very same novel I had been reaching for. Our hands brushed, and we both laughed at the awkwardness of it. "You go ahead," he said with a grin. "But only if you promise to tell me if it's worth reading." That small moment grew into an entire evening of conversation. We walked out of that store together, coffee cups in hand, as if we had known each other for years. From then on, Daniel became part of my everyday. He was spontaneous, always finding ways to make life feel alive. Midnight walks, unexpected road trips, conversations that lasted until dawn. He pulled me out of the routine I had trapped myself in. But it wasn't just his energy. It was the way he listened. He noticed details about me no one else ever did. The way I tapped my fingers when I was nervous. How I always carried a notebook, scribbling little thoughts no one else ever read. With him I felt seen. And then came love. Not the loud, dramatic kind you see in movies. No, ours was quieter, deeper. The kind that grows slowly but roots itself firmly. I thought we had forever. But forever doesn't always mean what you think. The cracks began small. Work took more of his time, and I found myself waiting for calls that came later and later. Arguments crept in, about the future, about where we were heading, about dreams that didn't seem to align. And then one day he was gone. No long goodbye. No explanation that made sense. Just a silence that echoed louder than words ever could. For years, I tried to bury the memories. I told myself it was over, that he had chosen a different path, that life simply moves on. But sitting there, holding that letter, I realized Daniel had left me something I had never known existed, his final words. And in that moment, all I wanted was to know. Why? The attic was still and quiet, except for the sound of my own breath. The letter shook in my hands as I unfolded it, my heart pounding like it already knew the words inside would change everything. Daniel's handwriting was neat, steady, just as I remembered. Seeing it again after 20 years felt almost impossible, like he was suddenly in the room with me. I began to read. "If you're holding this letter, it means fate has finally let you find it. I don't know when, or if you ever will. But if you do, please read every word. Because you deserve the truth, and I've carried it with me for too long." My chest tightened. I paused, swallowing hard before continuing. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I thought it was the only way to protect you. Back then, I was in trouble. Trouble I couldn't drag you into. I was young, reckless, and I made mistakes. Mistakes that put me in danger. The kind of danger that could have touched you if I had stayed. Walking away was the hardest choice I've ever made. But I convinced myself it was the only way to keep you safe. Tears blurred my vision. All those years I had wondered, was it me? Did I not love him enough? Did he simply stop caring? And now here it was, the truth I had never imagined. Not a day has passed that I haven't thought of you. I kept your letters, your photographs, even the small notes you'd leave on my desk. They were my reminder that love was real. That you were real. I don't know if life will ever give me the chance to explain this to your face. But if you're reading this, at least you'll know. Losing you was not a choice I wanted. It was a sacrifice I made. My hands trembled as I clutched the paper closer to my chest. The silence of the attic grew heavier. The walls seemed to lean in around me, listening, as if they too were holding the weight of his words. And then came the final lines. Lines that carved themselves into my soul. If you've built a life without me, I hope it has been filled with joy. If you've found love again, I hope it has been kind. But if you are still alone, if a part of you still remembers me, know that somewhere out there, even after all this time, a part of me still belongs to you. By the time I reached the end, tears streamed down my face. 20 years of silence. 20 years of unanswered questions. And with one fragile piece of paper, Daniel had given me both closure and a new kind of ache. Because now, I didn't just know why he left. Now I knew he had never stopped loving me. And the question echoing in my heart was simple, yet impossible. If he loved me all this time, where is he now? I sat there for what felt like hours, clutching Daniel's letter. My tears had dried, but the ache in my chest remained. His words had given me answers, yes, but they had also opened a door I thought had been closed forever. For years, I told myself the past was over. That chapter of my life was done. But now? Now I knew he hadn't left me because he stopped loving me. He left because he thought it was the only way to protect me. And suddenly, the silence of the last 2 decades felt unbearable. I needed to know. Was he still alive? Did he ever find peace? Or had he carried this burden with him until the very end? The next morning, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and spread the letter out on the kitchen table. I read it again, slowly this time, searching for clues. There were none, no dates, no places, no hints about where he had gone. Just his heart poured out on paper. Still, I refused to stop there. I began with the simplest step. Searching online. Typing his name into every corner of the internet I could think of. Dozens of results popped up, but none that seemed to be him. Too many strangers. Too many faces that didn't match the man I remembered. Hours turned into days. Days into weeks. Each dead end felt heavier than the last. But then one afternoon something changed. Buried deep in an old online newspaper archive, I found his name. It was a small article from almost 15 years ago. Daniel had been involved in a local community project in a town 2 states away from where we once lived. No photo. No details. Just a name, a date, and the briefest mention of his work. But it was enough. My heart pounded as I read that tiny clipping over and over. He had been alive. He had been out there, trying to build something good, something meaningful. I printed the article and pinned it to my wall like a piece of a puzzle. For the first time in 20 years, I felt hope. The search wasn't over. It had only just begun. That night, as I sat alone. Weeks passed, and my life became consumed by the search. Every morning I'd wake with renewed determination. And every night I'd fall asleep with questions still echoing in my mind. Where was Daniel? Had he ever thought of reaching out again? And if I did find him, what would I even say after all these years? One evening, after another long day of chasing dead ends, I almost gave up. I was tired, worn down, and the silence of my house felt heavier than ever. But then, I found something. On a local community forum linked to that old newspaper article, there was a name. Daniel Carter. The same Daniel. A man who had volunteered at a community center, teaching kids how to play guitar. The post was dated just 5 years ago. My heart raced as I scrolled further. There were photos this time, blurry, candid shots of a man with gray in his hair, sitting with children, a guitar in his hands. It was him. Older, yes. Changed by time. But still Daniel. Still the man whose smile I would recognize anywhere. I stared at the screen, tears welling up. After 20 years of silence, I was looking at his face again. I learned that he had spent much of his later years quietly, away from the city, dedicating himself to helping others. No spotlight, no noise, just service, kindness, and music. But as I dug deeper, I found one more detail that stopped me cold. An obituary. It was dated only 2 years ago. Daniel had passed away, peacefully, surrounded by the very community he had devoted his life to. My breath caught in my chest. The tears came, heavier than before, not just for the loss, but for all the time we had lost. But mixed with the grief was something else. Peace. Because now I knew the truth. He hadn't vanished because he stopped loving me. He hadn't disappeared because I didn't matter. He had walked away out of love, out of sacrifice. And when life gave him no way back, he still carried me in his heart. I closed my eyes and whispered his name. Daniel, thank you. In that moment, I realized something important. Sometimes, love doesn't end the way we imagine. Sometimes it doesn't fit the fairy tales or the promises we make when we're young. But that doesn't make it any less real. Love can live on, in memories, in words, in letters that survive decades. Daniel was gone, but he had left me something priceless. His truth, his love, his story. And for the first time in years I felt free.